In this video, we'll be talking about the graphs of sine and cosine. The sine function, I've shown two periods here. Some things that you need to know about it. The basic sine curve will always cross the x-axis at 0, and then pi and 2 pi going to the right, and then negative pi and negative 2 pi going to the left. And I've only shown two periods, but these will continue. If I needed to keep going, then it would also cross at 3 pi and then 4 pi and so forth. Also, the maximum of the curve is at positive 1, and the minimum is at negative 1. The domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity. The range, in other words, going up and down, goes just from negative 1 to positive 1 inclusive. Our sine curve is continuous over the entire domain, and the x-intercepts are n pi, where n is some integer, 0 pi, 1 pi, 2 pi, and so forth. Period is how long it takes to do one complete curve. So we can measure our period from the 0 right here, and notice that our sine function starts by going up and then comes back down and heads back toward the axis. So at this point is when the period ends if we started it here. Now you can take any two identical points and determine the period. So that's why I usually start at 0. So then whatever this number is, subtracting 0 will tell me what the period is. Also, my sine curve is symmetric with respect to the origin, meaning that it is an odd function, so that the sine of negative x is equal to negative sine x. Now let's look at the same information for cosine curve. Cosine curve is similar to the sine curve in that it's a smooth, continuous roller coaster type curve. The cosine curve, however, if we look at where it hits the y-axis, it starts here at positive 1. Remember, the sine started at 0. So the cosine curve starts on the y-axis at positive 1 and then hits the x-axis and has x-intercepts at pi over 2 and then 3 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, and so on. So the x-intercepts are odd numbers multiplied by pi over 2. We show odd numbers with 2n plus 1, where n is an integer. But cosine is similar to sine in that the domain is all real numbers, and the range is from negative 1 to positive 1 inclusive. And it's also got a period of 2 pi. So if we went from this point at x equals 0 to this point at x equal 2 pi, we would see that the period is 2 pi. The cosine function is symmetric with respect to the y-axis, so it's an even function, meaning that points over on the positive side of the x-axis are reflected across the y-axis, so that this point at 3 pi over 2, we have an identical point at negative 3 pi over 2. And being an even function then means that the cosine of negative x is equal to the cosine of x.